It started with laughter that could melt the coldest day. Two hearts intertwined by years of secrets, trust, and the kind of love only best friends know. But that night, when the wine shimmered under the chandelier and a careless glance lingered too long, something in the air shifted. The light between them flickered into shadow. A subtle silence replaced their easy joy, and behind every smile hid a thought neither dared to confess. The sound of a man's voice in the distance tightened the moment, his presence stirring invisible threads of temptation. What once was pure began to taste forbidden. No one could know then that this fleeting spark would ignite the betrayal that would destroy them all. Morning light cut through the curtains like confession through sin. What was laughter last night now felt like memory soaked in guilt. The house was still, but silence spoke louder than any word. Somewhere inside, the heart wrestled between justification and denial. It wasn't love, at least, not yet, but it was something dangerous enough to feel alive. The echo of his voice lingered, teasing, reminding, and though nothing had happened, the boundary between right and wrong had already dissolved. It was a line crossed, not by hands, but by hearts too close to the flame. The days that followed were filled with gestures too small to mean anything, but too heavy to ignore. Each accidental touch, every shared glance, drew invisible lines across their lives. The universe seemed to conspire in secrecy, placing them in rooms alone, letting their laughter blur into something more dangerous. The air between them thickened with curiosity disguised as coincidence, and though she tried to resist, temptation became rhythm, steady, patient, waiting for the right night to unfold into sin. The evening fell heavy with music and unspoken words. As the guests mingled, her gaze kept finding his, like a secret language only they could hear. The laughter around them faded, replaced by a heartbeat that echoed through the crowd. The decision was made in silence, not with a word, not even a touch, but in the surrender of her own conscience. Somewhere deep within, she felt the first thread of her soul unravel. What she didn't know was that this unraveling would become her noose. It was late when the last car left and the laughter faded into quiet. She stood by the window, the city glowing beneath her, feeling both powerful and terrified. Behind her, a presence approached, familiar, magnetic, dangerous. She didn't turn. She didn't have to. The air between them was thick with everything they'd never say. When his reflection appeared beside hers in the glass, she finally understood. The betrayal had already begun, not with a kiss, but with the choice not to walk away. The first lie came softly, like a whisper that could be excused. She told herself it was harmless, that stolen moments meant nothing. Yet every time their eyes met, the air seemed to hum with something forbidden. Nights grew longer, and her heart began to rewrite morality in favor of desire. He played his part perfectly. Attentive, persuasive, patient. Temptation was no longer a stranger but a guest she welcomed willingly. And though she knew she was walking toward a fall, the thrill of it all made her feel invincible. There was no guilt left, only hunger dressed as fate. It was raining the night they crossed the line. The city was quiet, the world outside blurred by stormlight. What began as comfort, a hand on a trembling shoulder, became an embrace too desperate to stop. For one stolen hour, time held its breath. But the silence that followed was louder than any storm. She stared at the ceiling afterward, realization crashing down like thunder. Every secret has a price, and she had just mortgaged her soul. Yet beneath the guilt was something darker, satisfaction. The forbidden had tasted sweeter than forgiveness. Days turned into a web of deception. Lies layered over lies until even truth began to sound suspicious. Every phone call was a risk. Every smile rehearsed. She told herself she could keep both worlds intact, the thrill of the affair and the illusion of friendship. But desire demands sacrifice, and her conscience had already started to erode. He promised her forever, whispering dreams into her ear, while his eyes gleamed with something far less pure. What she saw as love, he saw as opportunity. It was supposed to be their secret, a private rebellion against the predictable. But secrets grow impatient. They demand to be found. Every time her phone buzzed, her chest tightened. Every time he said her name, her heart raced between fear and obsession. The guilt began to corrode her sleep, and the mirror became an enemy. Yet she couldn't stop. The affair wasn't just about love anymore. It was about power, about feeling seen in a way she never had before. She didn't realize that the same thrill binding them would soon become the rope that hung them both. She told herself she was in control, that love had chosen her, not the other way around. But in his gaze, she began to see something colder, a man calculating his next move. When he spoke of the future, his tone carried possession, not passion. The very hunger that drew her in now began to consume her. She had taken what wasn't hers, and for the first time, the victory felt hollow. Deep inside, an unfamiliar chill began to whisper the word she refused to hear. Karma. The truth never arrives politely. It shatters glass and echoes through hearts like thunder. When Claire saw the message, one careless word followed by a familiar name, the world beneath her collapsed. Her breath caught between disbelief and rage. Memories replayed in cruel clarity. Every shared dinner, every secret glance she dismissed. The betrayal had been hiding in plain sight, wrapped in friendship's disguise. The silence that followed was suffocating. Somewhere she could almost hear laughter mocking her pain. And in that silence, something inside her broke. Not her love, but her trust. Confrontation doesn't always explode. It can whisper. Claire arrived without warning, her calmness more terrifying than fury. The room grew colder as their eyes met. She asked only one question, soft and trembling, and the silence that followed answered everything. The truth filled the air, thick and poisonous. Isabella's voice cracked, excuses faltering on her tongue. There was no apology powerful enough to undo the sin. The woman who once held her hand in laughter now looked at her like a stranger carved from betrayal. What once was love turned into silence sharp enough to wound. He arrived moments later, arrogance disguised as calm. Daniel's tone was gentle, rehearsed, the voice of a man who believed he could control even pain. But Claire's eyes no longer searched for reason. They searched for closure. She didn't scream. She simply stepped back, as if distance itself could erase them. The betrayal had stolen her words. Daniel tried to reach for her hand, but the gesture hung lifeless in the air. In that moment, she realized he wasn't worth the tears she'd already given. His heart was a mirror, reflecting only himself. The house felt emptier than ever once Claire was gone. Silence became punishment. What Isabella once called love now looked like ashes in daylight. Daniel moved through her apartment as if it already belonged to him. His affection now mechanical, his smile too practiced. She wanted to believe it was worth it, that the destruction had meaning, but every time she looked at him, she saw what she'd taken and what she'd lost. The echo of Claire's voice haunted her walls, whispering truths she refused to face, that some victories taste like poison. She went to the mirror and saw a stranger. The woman who once envied her best friend now envied the person she used to be. Before the lies, before the guilt, Daniel's words had grown sharp, his tenderness gone. He'd taken her trust, her stability, and replaced them with dependency. She realized, too late, that she hadn't stolen love. She'd been sold an illusion. The reflection in the mirror seemed to smirk back, as if Karma herself were standing behind her, waiting. The same pain she'd caused was now circling back, silent and precise, ready to strike. Their wedding was beautiful, at least on the surface. The kind of ceremony where flowers bloom to disguise decay. Smiles stretched wide for cameras, vows crafted from half-truths, and applause masking judgment. She wore white, pretending purity, while he promised forever with a grin that barely touched his eyes. The crowd whispered. The world pretended to bless, what everyone secretly condemned. She believed love could rewrite the past, could wash away betrayal. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't a beginning. It was the most elegant ending ever written. Marriage revealed itself not as a promise, but a prison. The first months glowed with champagne and rehearsed affection, yet shadows lingered. His charm dimmed, replaced by control. Questions disguised as concern, isolation masked as devotion. The apartment became a museum of silence. He moved through her life like a storm that refused to end, always calm before another strike. She tried to hold on, convincing herself this was love's price. But love doesn't demand surrender. It devours only when it's built on guilt. Money became his language of love. He spoke in investments, accounts, and promises of shared futures. Slowly, her name vanished from documents, replaced by his. He called it protection, she called it trust. But beneath the smooth words lived a predator. He began to measure her worth, not by affection but by access. Each signature she gave away was another piece of herself slipping into his hands. The empire she built, the savings she'd earned, all were becoming his trophies, and she didn't even notice the theft had begun. Their love turned cold, mechanical, rehearsed. He kissed her cheek out of routine, not affection. Every dinner felt like a negotiation, every touch a transaction. She began to feel like a guest in her own life. Sometimes she'd wake in the night and see him sitting in the dark, staring at nothing, his mind elsewhere. She wondered if this was karma or punishment, or if perhaps they were the same thing. What she'd stolen out of envy was now being stolen back, piece by piece, silently, perfectly. She started noticing the small things first. Empty drawers, missing statements, the subtle distance in his voice when he spoke her name. Doubt became dread, and dread became realization. The betrayal she'd once committed was coming full circle. She wanted to confront him, but the fear of losing him paralyzed her. Somewhere inside, she still loved the man who had ruined her. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She had stolen another woman's husband, and now karma was letting her watch as he slowly, methodically stole everything from her. It began quietly. Missing digits, misplaced papers, a transfer she didn't remember authorizing. At first, she blamed herself. Exhaustion, oversight. But the pattern grew undeniable. He was careful, meticulous, turning her own trust into a weapon. She tried to believe it was a misunderstanding, but love no longer spoke in warmth. It whispered in withdrawals and forged signatures. Each question she asked met with reassurance, so smooth it almost sounded like truth. But beneath his words, she heard the echo of her own past lies. And karma's footsteps catching up. The empire she once built began to crumble beneath her manicured hands. Investors withdrew, calls went unanswered, and doors that once opened with smiles now shut with silence. She felt the humiliation sharpen into panic. Every loss carried his scent, every ruined account his invisible touch. Yet he stayed calm, telling her not to worry, promising recovery as if the chaos were just bad luck. But behind his soothing tone, she saw it, the same glimmer of satisfaction she'd once felt when taking what wasn't hers. Only now, she was the one being robbed blind. The arguments began to replace the silence. Nights once filled with wine and music now ended in slammed doors and accusations. She demanded answers. He gave riddles. His affection had evaporated, replaced by cold indifference. Every time she tried to reach for him, he drifted further away, wrapped in secrets. She searched for proof, but what she found was worse. The trail of her own naivety, written in signatures she'd given out of love. She had wanted him more than truth. Now truth was all she had left, and it was merciless. One night, she followed him. The city was wrapped in fog, her heart pounding with dread. She watched from her car as he entered a luxury hotel, his arm around another woman, a stranger wearing the same perfume she once wore. In that moment, the illusion shattered completely. He hadn't just taken her money. He'd taken her dignity. Every betrayal she'd ever inflicted returned to her multiplied. The pain was no longer poetic. It was punishment. She realized karma wasn't a force of fate. It was a mirror she could no longer avoid. When she returned home, the apartment felt foreign. Half-empty drawers, missing jewelry, and an echo where love used to live. The accounts were drained, the investments dissolved. He had vanished, leaving behind nothing but debts and her own reflection in shattered glass. The woman who once thought she'd won had been stripped of everything. Her wealth, her pride, her illusion of control. In the eerie silence, she laughed. Not out of madness, but recognition. She finally understood. The same hands that stole love had now stolen her fortune. Karma hadn't destroyed her. It had simply finished what she started. News travels faster than grief. By morning, her downfall was no longer a secret. It was a headline. Every betrayal she'd hidden, every lie she'd spoken, resurfaced under flashing cameras and cruel laughter. The world devoured her story, calling it poetic justice. She sat numb as reporters painted her as the villain turned victim. He was gone. Accounts drained, phone dead, name vanished from every record. The empire she'd built on deception now lay in ruins. For the first time, she understood how swiftly karma repays its debts. With precision, not pity. She returned to her penthouse, only to find it stripped of everything that once defined her. The artwork gone, the safe empty. Even the curtains removed as if mocking her vulnerability. Each echo in the bare room sounded like his voice, laughing from afar. For days she wandered aimlessly, trapped between anger and disbelief. The irony was cruel. She had built her life on appearances, and now, stripped of them, she was finally forced to see herself. The world had taken everything but the truth, and that truth cut deeper than any theft. Then came the letter. No apology, no closure, just numbers and mockery. He had left her a message hidden in the final bank transfer. Consider this even. It wasn't about money anymore. It was revenge, perfect. She realized then that Daniel hadn't just stolen her fortune. He'd stolen her pride, her peace, and every illusion she once wore as armor. Karma didn't just punish, it mirrored. She saw herself in him now. Her past cruelty reflected in his calculated greed. And for the first time, she felt something close to remorse. Weeks passed, and the whispers faded, but she remained haunted. She began visiting the small cafe where she and Claire once laughed, unable to escape the echo of what she'd destroyed. Sometimes she thought she saw Claire's reflection in the glass, smiling softly, not out of spite, but forgiveness. That silent grace hurt more than any revenge. She finally understood that karma wasn't punishment from the world. It was the consequence of betraying one's own soul. The pain she'd caused had returned not to destroy her, but to awaken her. The final blow wasn't financial. It was emotional. One night, she opened her laptop to find every trace of him erased. Photos deleted, messages gone, accounts closed. It was as if he had never existed. That emptiness was the truest punishment. Absence more painful than hate. She stared into the glow of the screen, realizing this was what she'd once done to Claire, vanishing without apology. The loop was complete. Karma had finished her story exactly as it began, with silence, regret, and the echo of her own choices. Time has a cruel way of healing. It doesn't mend. It teaches. Months passed in silence, her name forgotten by headlines, her wealth reduced to memories of marble and glass. She lived simply now, in an apartment that creaked when the wind blew. The quiet no longer frightened her. It comforted her. She'd learned to live without the noise of power, without the illusion of control. In the stillness, regret became reflection. What she'd once called punishment began to feel like clarity. For the first time in years, she could look at herself and see not a villain, but a woman who finally understood the cost of envy. One afternoon, she saw Claire again, not in person, but across a crowded street. Time had been kind to her. She looked lighter, free, her laughter carrying in the breeze like forgiveness unspoken. Isabella froze, heart pounding with shame and longing. She wanted to run, to hide, but Claire's gaze met hers. There was no hatred there, only quiet understanding. A small nod, soft and fine. That single moment hurt more than any punishment. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't a gift. It was a mirror showing what she should have been all along. That night, she wrote for the first time in years. Not apologies, truths. She poured her heart onto the page. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to finally face herself. Each sentence peeled away the layers of justification she'd lived behind. By dawn, she had written the story of her own undoing. The rise built on lies, the fall scripted by fate. She folded the letter, placed it by the window, and watched the sunrise. For once, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like absolution, earned through pain. Morning brought rain, gentle and forgiving. She stepped outside, the chill kissing her skin. For the first time, she didn't hide. The world had seen her at her worst, yet here she was, still standing. Every drop that touched her face felt like penance, washing away layers of guilt she no longer needed to carry. She wasn't the same woman who stole love. She was something quieter now, humbler, more human. Karma hadn't destroyed her. It had remade her into someone who could finally feel clean. In the quiet after the storm, she placed her final letter on Claire's doorstep. She didn't wait to be seen or forgiven. Some stories don't need an audience. As she walked away, the wind carried the faint scent of roses from a nearby garden, the same scent that once filled Claire's home. It made her smile through the ache. The circle was complete, not through revenge or loss, but understanding. In the end, karma hadn't stolen from her. It had given her the one thing she never truly had: peace.